Welcome to this week's episode of Carolina News Now. I'm Clayton Bauman. Whether you're in North or South Carolina, we want to thank you as always each week for joining us. This week got a bit of a bite-sized Carolina News Now. Got 4 stories for you from across North and South Carolina. Before we get into that though, I want to start off as we always do with a check of your forecast to help you plan that weekend and any plans that you might have. Here's meteorologist Star Derry.
We are still monitoring some drought conditions across parts of the Carolinas. The good news is that it's not area wide, but you do see that stretch from Charlotte into Wilmington where that is still considered dry to moderate, and the drought level, and then Charleston also included right on the edge of things. We are going to be tracking a little bit of a rain chance heading into the weekend. Shouldn't really impact most of us on Friday as we do head into Saturday afternoon. Small chance for some very light showers moving through from Asheville into Charlotte. But better chance for rain is going to come on Sunday. Now you'll notice a little bit of a mix from the mountains, but most of us, this is just going to be regular old rain. It looks much more widespread and long-lived than it'll actually be, likely as this moves through the Carolinas on Sunday. Scattered showers, especially as we do see that move into the eastern portions of the state. And for the most part, we are going to see some of these rainfall numbers just on the lower side. Now, as we do also watch the rain, we're also watching the temperatures, of course. Saturday, we're going to have some really nice temperatures for southeastern North Carolina and much of South Carolina, actually reaching into the 60s, which is pretty good for this time of the year. The rest of us, though, hanging out in the 40s and 50s. Then we get into Sunday, and of course, we've really been on a roller coaster with these temperatures for the last couple of days. Does cool off even into eastern North Carolina, although I do think along the coast we could see a few more 50s than this is really leading us to believe. And then, of course, south along the South Carolina coast, we could see those getting very solidly into the 50s, which is about where we'd like to see this time of the year. Now, as we do continue into next week, it looks like overall a fairly dry stretch, so we'll continue to bring you updates.
All right, thank you, Star. Winter definitely not done with North and South Carolina just yet. I want to jump into our stories for you this week, and we're going to begin in Wilmington with WECT. Over the years, you've probably noticed there just isn't as much beach as there used to be. One big reason is sea levels are, of course, on the rise. New report suggests over the next 30 years, seas could rise as much as they have over the last 100 years. WECT's Michael Pratt spoke with scientists and an expert on what the future holds and what we can do right now to help preserve our precious coastline.
You can't always see them, but their impacts are visible. They're called living shorelines, and they help restore natural wetlands like saltwater marshes and tidal creeks. Something Dr. Lexia Weaver, a coastal scientist with the North Carolina Coastal Federation, says traditional bulkheads destroy.
What happens is that when the water comes up and hits that bulkhead, that energy has nowhere to go. So it comes back with it. And over time, you lose all of that important habitat.
Mary Margaret McKinney, Director of Coastal Restoration at RS Shorelines, explains how these living shorelines work.
That energy hits the living shoreline. Part of the wave energy passes through of it. Part of it passes over it. As it passes over it, sediment drops out of the water column because the wave has been slowed down. That allows the marsh to slowly build up behind.
These artificial structures are meant to mimic nature and have positive impacts under the water as well. A good thing for seafood lovers.
Anywhere that oysters grow, oysters will rapidly colonize the structure and form a living oyster reef.
Reclaiming wetlands won't stop sea level rise, but even a small marsh can have a dramatic impact on slowing down the damages from rising tides.
Even a 10-foot wide marsh is going to slow down all of that wave energy incredibly, like 90% of the wave energy.
An effort that can help protect property and help the environment along the way.
That was WECT's Michael Pratt reporting from Wilmington, North Carolina. To our next story now, which is a WBTV investigation out of Charlotte, North Carolina, looking into hundreds of thousands of dollars from a North Carolina program meant to help people pay their rent and utility bills. Instead, that money has been going to some fraudsters. It's called the HOPE program, and it was created during the pandemic. Chief Investigative Reporter Nick Oxner is asking how this keeps happening.
This unassuming apartment building sits out of the way at the end of a road in Mocksville. Sunset Terrace has dozens of units. Public records show it's owned by a company called Azorian Properties. But this application for a HOPE grant for Unit 22 says the complex is owned by a woman named Takia Hawkins. The form says someone named Katina Sidoni lives there.
Hi there.
So I visited Unit 22.
I'm here because someone applied for HOPE benefits, for state benefits, using this address.
The fraudulent application resulted in a check being cut for $12,600 to Hawkins, the woman who's not the landlord.
And she got this check in the name, claiming that the resident who lives here is a Katina Sidoni. But here's the check for $12,000.
I have no clue, to be honest with you. I never heard of this.
These HOPE grant applications show Takia Hawkins, her sister Shanesha Hawkins, and others submitted fraudulent claims for properties all over the state. They were all approved, resulting in these checks, totaling more than $230,000. One of those checks was for this address in Davidson County, where Louise Shaw lives.
I don't even know what a HOPE grant is.
Someone submitted this application in 170 Surratt Drive, Apartment 1 in Denton. That's where we are, right?
Yeah.
These folks, they got $8,400.
I don't even know. Who did it go to?
It went to this Shanesha Hawkins.
I've never heard of that name.
Here we found a group of people who have submitted what appears to be fraudulent applications for nearly $250,000. How does that happen?
Yeah, so first of all, Nick, I want to make sure that we put in perspective what the HOPE program has been able to do. So we have sent out $774 million worth of checks to landlords and utility companies across the state.
Laura Hogshead is director of the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency, the state agency that administers the HOPE program. When we talked with her last fall, she said her office had robust fraud detection in place. She made the same claims in an interview for this story. Even as we asked her about a stack of fraudulent applications her office approved and paid.
Anytime we notice something odd, that's why we have both a computer compliance check and a human compliance check, because fraud tactics change.
But what are
So
they
we
checking?
have to make sure.
What are they
I
checking?
can't tell you exactly what we check because that would give everybody an idea of how to evade that. But I want to know that you know that we constantly update those indicators.
One of the applicants we're looking at in our story used the leasing center for a family housing place at Camp Lejeune and said they owned that. How did that get through your supposedly robust system of fraud compliance checks?
Yeah, anytime you have a program this big, you're going to have people who try to defraud it.
Hogshead said the applications we flagged were referred to law enforcement for investigation before our questions. But she wouldn't say which agency or when the referral was made.
I'm sorry, the person you were trying to reach has a...
Takia Hawkins didn't answer when we called and didn't respond to a text message. Her sister, Shanesha, did pick up the phone, briefly.
Hi, this is Nick Oxner. I'm a reporter at WBTV. We're recording this conversation for a story that we're working on about the fraudulent HOPE grant applications you submitted.
Sorry.
We're wondering, you got $43,105. No, she hung up.
That was Nick Oxner looking into allegedly fraudulent activity with respect to the HOPE program, which was created during the pandemic to help people pay rent. To our next story now, distracted driving. Many of us are guilty of it. In many cases, it can result in tragedy on our roadways. North Carolina has had a distracted law on the books for some time now with respect to texting while driving and penalties that can happen if you're caught by law enforcement doing that. Down in South Carolina, they have a bill, a distracted driving bill that's moving through their legislature right now. Mary Green with WIS out of Columbia reports on that story.
As a trooper, a lot of times we see vehicles that's all over the road. We see collisions, we see crashes. We stop motorists who we believe are drunk and come to find out they're too busy looking at their phone.
Under the Hands-Free Act, drivers could get a ticket for holding a phone or being on their phone in general while they're driving, including texting, emailing, reading a message, or surfing the web. It would also ban drivers from watching a video, game, or video call while they're operating a vehicle, even if they physically aren't holding the phone or device.
When you're driving a 6,000-pound vehicle, you need both hands on the wheel. You need to pay attention to your surroundings. You need to watch out and drive defensively for other drivers.
For the first offense, drivers would receive a $100 ticket. Then for each offense after that, they'd get hit with a $200 ticket, plus 2 points on their record. This would not apply if drivers are parked or stopped, including at a red light. Christian Turner says he sees drivers on their phones just about every day he rides his motorcycle.
I've been hit off my bike for someone being on their phone.
He has mixed feelings on the bill.
It would be a good law to have, but no one's going to follow it.
About half of states already have a hands-free driving law. The lead sponsor of South Carolina's bill says data from those states shows legislation like this will change outcomes here as well.
And I'll be the first to tell you that this bill's not going to stop everybody from using their phone in a hands-free fashion. But what we will see is that there will be compliance by a large number of people, and that will reduce some of the accidents.
Mary Green with WIS out of Columbia, South Carolina. To our last story, and we hope it's it tugs at the heartstrings for you. Our Hannah Jeffries here at WITN went inside a Eastern Carolina school who welcomed the North Carolina Symphony into their auditorium. The Symphony had basically shut down operations for nearly the last 2 years because of the pandemic, but now the halls of that auditorium were recently filled full of music.
From one end of the auditorium to the other, hundreds of eyes and ears fully engrossed in a symphony of sound.
If you listen to a happy song, it'll make you feel more happy, and the opposite was sad.
As Carteret County 4th and 5th graders watched their music lessons come to life.
We've been learning like singing and clarinets and stuff.
Allowing them to move to the beat of some of their favorite genres.
I like country and classic.
Wednesday's stage is mostly for the classics like Beethoven and Mozart. Legendary composers kids have been reading up on for months.
I've been working for 3 months now, going over the music, the composers, the form.
Education to make them appreciate the first in-person education concert the NC Symphony has performed since March of 2020, when the pandemic forced them to take a rest. As educators hope every note gives the next generation of musicians some inspiration.
We all remember the first concert that we went to as a child, and we really hope today will be a life-changing experience for some of our young people.
Absolutely love that story. I love their little hands up in the air. That's when you know it's a moving performance. That's it for our, what I call a bite-sized episode of Carolina News Now for this week. We want to thank you for joining us, whether you're in North or South Carolina. We'll be back next week with another episode of our show. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend.